Perfect.
Yay!
So welcome everyone. This is conversation 3 of my really exciting series of conversations with different practitioners, all about shifting your mindset and growing into your potential. So welcome everyone, whether you're watching live or whether you're catching up. I always check the comments if you are watching from my group, and if you have any questions or anything that you want to post as we're going along, then please feel free to do that and I will come back to them. So I am here today with Dr. Rathika Marsh. I'm so excited to have Rathika on.
Thank you.
Introduce herself in a moment, but I just wanted to say a little bit about how Rathika and I are connected and why I felt kind of inspired to have Rathika on. So Rathika and I have known each other for the past 3 years. We've been working as part of the same team of educational psychologists. Rathika's now left the core team. I'm just about to leave the core team. And some of you will know actually that this week my own coach Rosie Peacock was scheduled to come into the group, and she was unavailable in the end. She's going to come back on May, and it all kind of just fell into alignment because I saw Rathika post something about basically how white the wellbeing world can seem, right, and how a number of coaches, or the vast majority of coaches, are white. And if you think about how many either Black or Asian or South Asian, as Rathika is, coaches that you know, if you take a moment to think about who you're following on social media, it is a very, very white world. And I know that Rathika is a strong believer in diversity and inclusion, as am I. And I have moved to an area that's very white right at the beginning of the pandemic, out to Marple on the outskirts of Manchester, currently working in the city. But I felt really inspired, many reasons why I wanted Rathika on, but I felt really inspired to have Rathika on, to allow her to speak about her view about the diversity in the wellbeing world and in the coaching world, amongst several other things that I'm sure we will cover. So welcome, Rathika. Thank you so much for being here. Would you like to just introduce yourself briefly and say a little bit about your business as well?
Yes. So I'm Dr. Rathika Marsh. I'm the spiritual psychologist. So my business is I combine my experience as a psychologist with spiritual coaching. So I bring in those two kind of ideologies, I guess, two different backgrounds, and I merge them together because what I was finding, I suppose, in my own process of healing, on my own journey of healing, that the power has come from the spiritual part for me. That's not the same for everybody, but there's been something really powerful that I feel in my own experiences has been missing from the psychology world. And so I've combined the two to create support for clients. So whether that's on a one-to-one, in a group, I'm running a retreat next year, and courses as well. And it brings in lots of different modalities. So my programs, particular programs have things like a somatic coach, a breathwork teacher, energy healer. So it kind of brings in the more holistic practices as well. And I bring that into my programs as well. So yeah, that's my business. It's all about helping people to heal from their traumas. I believe that everybody experiences trauma. It's just that we understand trauma to be a certain thing. We see it as having to be this really bad thing that has happened to you, when actually there's a lot of hidden traumas that people experience that aren't acknowledged, that can make your experience feel very invalidated. So my business is about raising consciousness, raising your awareness of your patterns of behavior, of why you might do things, then you continue to do them even though you know that they're not serving you, and helping people to move forward from that and process challenges that they might have experienced in their life.
Yeah, love that. And you know, I find it so fascinating, the overlap between Eastern philosophy and Western psychology, like you've said. And I think, like, for me, all of that really resonates because I've been studying or practicing with more of a spiritual approach as long as I have been studying and as a registered psychologist. So it's not like I kind of started in one world and then, you know, moved over to another. I've been in both for equal length of time. And I think actually, like, the more that you study more of the history of spirituality, or, you know, whatever it is, yoga lineages, all of the maps and the more modern psychological approaches kind of are lifted from there, really. There's no separation, like everything kind of ends up molding into one, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely.
And I think this trauma, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say that for me, I was so in the psychology side, I was so in the learning side, and I was unconsciously aware of my spiritual essence. And so then for me, it was the other way round. It was like suddenly discovering it and being like, oh wow, like you know, that combination, understanding why I needed to look at this stuff, why I needed to look at my own stuff, and the power of connecting with yourself, but also something beyond. So that was that. It was like it was literally like like entering another world, or becoming conscious of it, even though it was subconsciously there.
Yeah. And do you just want to say a little bit more about your kind of journey into spiritual practices, and any kind of challenges you faced along the way, I guess? Because I suppose a lot of women, especially in my Facebook group, will be at different stages in their own journeys. And I think it's important for everyone to feel that they can relate to people who are either coaching or teaching, and to have that understanding that everyone's always on their own journey, right? Like, it's kind of never ending, and we all have to acknowledge where we're starting from, and as you've said, kind of look at that way forwards. But yeah, do you want to say just a little your own journey?
Yeah, definitely. Like, just to touch on what you said there, like, I think one of the biggest lies that is kind of spread in the coaching world or from wellness practitioners, just because I guess you're running a business as well, is that, you know, you are in some kind of state of enlightenment and that you don't get affected by anything. It's just not true. It's just that you have a different lens on things. That's the shift. I feel like I have a lens which is very different now to where I was at. So I guess my journey has been, you know, one of the things that when I talk to clients about is around like that validation of your own experiences. So for me, and a lot of people come to me and say this as well, I felt like I was detached from my experiences from childhood. And some of those you could describe as, you know, as trauma in the traditional sense. But because I was raised in a loving household with parents who did everything they could to put us through a good education, that provided for us, that supported us in their own way, I was then enmeshed with this guilt of like not feeling okay about things, but feeling so guilty at looking at it, you know. And just also this belief that like, oh, okay, like there's something wrong with me. So what I found was that, you know, I kind of felt like I struggled through my teens, and, you know, I was in like self-destructive patterns, really. And because I'd kind of gotten over that and reduced those self-destructive behaviors, it's a little bit like I just kind of swam through life thinking, okay, everything's all right. But then what I found over the years is that actually there were still repeating patterns that were potentially really harmful, but that, you know, that weren't going away. So I got to a point then where I just thought, I need to look at this. Like, I could, you know, I don't feel good about myself. I feel stuck. I feel like I'm going to do things that could jeopardize my life, you know, even though I have a good life. And yeah, I scared myself, I think. And I felt like, okay, I really need to look at this. And I'd kind of been through like periods of counseling and things like that, which were helpful for managing stuff in that moment, you know. But there wasn't really anything that I'd access to look at things at a deeper level. So I started using a psychotherapist, and she was great. And that was the first time that I understood the significance of your relationship, particularly as women, with our mothers. So that was like a big realization. And the wounds of that as well, you know, like realizing the importance of that relationship and what we observe of our mothers. Our mothers teach us everything, you know, subconsciously they teach us everything. They teach us how they view how you should relate to your body, how you relate to yourself, how you relate to others. And at the same time as that, I started exploring the spiritual side of things. So, you know, I started following Jake Woodard. I don't know if you've heard of him. And yeah, he's kind of always talking about, like, you know, you've got to look at your stuff. You've got to, you know, you kind of brought to this earth, and there's things that come up for you, and you've got to look at them, and you have to heal them in order to integrate those parts of you, integrate your darkness, and to create a sense of wholeness, rather than having these separate parts of you that you feel a sense of shame for. So I started doing that work. I started doing what we call shadow work, which is looking at the parts of yourself that you do feel shame for. And often they're hidden parts, so they're subconscious and we don't know about them. So I started kind of Googling about this, finding out more about it, doing my own journaling on it, and having these realizations about, oh, okay, that's what that's about. You know, this is why I get triggered in this way. And looking back, you know, being brave and looking back at my past and understanding why I held certain beliefs about myself. And I also joined like a spiritual kind of container of like raising consciousness, of healing. And like it was so powerful, because I just had these massive realizations about myself. One of them was, I can just fully be myself, and that's what I'm born to be. And I don't need to be anything else. And like, so that was a massive realization that I can show up in the world and just be myself. And that's where then the work stuff, what I found is that I had these certain realizations about myself, and then it was a bit like, okay, I can do that in these contexts, but maybe not in other contexts. So what I felt was, within a company kind of context of working as a psychologist, I realized that actually this is a space where I don't feel that I can fully authentically express myself. And so then I decided to, just felt like it was very sudden, and I just decided, why am I doing this? Don't want to do it anymore. And I'd started doing some of that coaching with adults at that point. I'd had like a handful of clients, not loads. And then, so I left, and then I started the Spiritual Psychologist business, which has been a massive, a massive journey, and continues to be. So yes, there's been like a lot of things that I've shifted about myself, a lot of crying, a lot of darkness, going through periods of real darkness, but also holding that sense of like a trust that like it will be okay. And that's where maybe this kind of raising consciousness work, it like makes you realize that when you are going through a dark period, you will come out the other end, because you're just going through an integration process of allowing things to come up, releasing them, and then you're shifting to a new space, a new elevated or ascended space, a new version of yourself. So whatever is going on for me now, and this is what I meant about the lens, right? The lens of how you see your feelings, how you see your thoughts, emotions, whatever it is, that you can view it from a space of, oh, okay, this is coming up for a reason. It's not coming up for no reason. It's coming up for a reason, so that I can look at this, so that I can heal from this. And then as soon as you kind of look at it and work on that healing part, allow those emotions to come up around it, you're then shifting it. So then when you shift something, when you shift these like rocks, it's like you're carrying around all these rocks. And like, as you kind of go through a process of like letting go of these different rocks, you feel lighter. And so when you get lighter, it's like you lift, right? And you expand and you step more into yourself. So that's how I kind of view the world now, which was very different from how I viewed it before.
Yeah, love that. There's so much there that I want to draw out, but I think you touched on something really important quite early on, which was how sometimes we can beat ourselves up because we feel like we've had, a really healthy upbringing. And, I count those people. Like, I've got a very supportive family, and I wouldn't say that I had anything that was tremendously traumatic in my childhood. But like you, I was, quite unhappy for parts of my teenage years, and then kind of started yoga in my early 20s. But I think there's a bit of a thing around sometimes, which is that because we talk about gratitude so much, and we talk about feeling grateful for what we have and grateful for our family, and actually it's a little bit more complex than that sometimes, because it is possible to feel grateful. Of course, like I talk about gratitude in my group all the time. Gratitude is shown in research to have a positive impact on well-being when practiced regularly, but we can be grateful for our life circumstances, and we can still acknowledge at the same time that there have been challenges and difficulty. Especially during a pandemic, but there can be both going on.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important message to convey, that you don't have to have had a massively traumatic childhood. Carrying stuff from your childhood, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, the thing that I taught, like what I said at the beginning was around how everybody experiences some kind of trauma. And what I meant by that is when we're growing up as children, we all go through socialization. So whatever community, culture, a society you're in, you are raised to fit into that community and society. So when you're growing up, your parents will instill certain rules about how you should live your life. So what you do then is you show up in the world as this baby, as a toddler, and you're quickly shaped to kind of hide parts of yourself as part of that socialization. So if, for example, you were a boisterous girl, but your parents were saying to you, no, you have to like rein that part of you in, and you have to behave like a girl should behave, and you should be wearing a dress, or you should be playing with dolls, or whatever it is, that rough and tumble play isn't encouraged, all of those things, you're going to, without even realizing it as a toddler, suppress those parts of you. So then when you're suppressing the parts of you, it just, you might even get reprimanded, right? Reprimanded, and it might not be in a severe way, but what you're going to pick up is, this part of me is bad. So then, and then for some people, they really do experience a lot of reprimanding around it, or continuous messages around, this part of you is good and this part of you is bad. And even as a parent, you know, I'm kind of mindful, but I forget. So I'll say to my son, oh, you're such a good boy, you know, that's really naughty, or whatever it is. And you just say these things. And I guess there's like certain things that we carry as parents, or as being adults ourselves, which we pass on to our children, about which aspects of them are good or bad. So then what happens is that you have to look at that part of you, because it's a suppressed part of you, and the suppressed part of you effectively impacts on how you react and respond. So perfectionism is the perfect example. Like when we look at people that are really perfectionist about certain things, they often want control over certain aspects of their life, because there's a deep sense of shame around, if I let go of control around this particular thing, it's going to mean that I'm a bad person, that I failed, that there's something wrong with me. And so it's kind of becoming like friends with the part of you that you've spent all of your life feeling like you've been trying to hide. And that's what the integration process is about. So as soon as you invite in that shame, as soon as you invite in, like, okay, how do I make friends with my sexuality, or how do I make friends with money, or how do I make friends with I don't know, being like louder with my voice, or communicating my truth, or whatever it is, you then find that actually a lot of those parts of you can hold a lot of power, and you then stand up as a more powerful being, because you're allowing yourself to be fully you. So that's the bit that's like hidden trauma almost, where it's like you can just walk around your whole life with this really horrible sense of like shame about certain things, and you push it away and push it away. But when you push stuff away so much, the way that I see it is that it manifests itself. It manifests itself in some ugly way anyway. It might show itself up in your body, or like whatever it is, it's going to come up somewhere. Or you feel like, oh, I'm doing that thing again that I like really don't like doing, but I do it anyway. And so it'll just keep coming up.
Yeah. And what we're talking about here is really just partially is culture and society, right? Because like, you know, for everyone listening as well, just taking a moment to consider how many influences there are, as you said, from literally the minute we're born, you know, based on your gender, based on the country you're born in, based on your parents' ethics, morals and values, based on, you know, your family environment and the school you went to. And like, I suppose I just want to bring in a few of my own personal reflections on this that have been coming up for me recently, because I'm sure lots of this is going to resonate with the listeners as well. So, you know, for me, being born firstly as a woman, you know, as a female, and kind of like unpacking to my 33 years to date, what that means, you know, what it means to be an attractive woman, like how society views women, the role of the woman in society, you know, any kind of like gender stereotypes, all that. And then also being born into a family where my dad was an accountant, my mum was a teacher. So all of that stuff around money, which has been like incredibly supportive for me in my life, to have been brought up in a family where I suppose there was so much like open conversation about money to an extent, but also there was definitely a thing about that you always save money, right? You always like have money saved away for a rainy day. And this is not about, you know, blaming like anyone or your parents or my parents or anything, but it's just that awareness, isn't it? So I've personally been looking a lot recently into like how I view money, how I feel about money, how I feel about money when I have less of it, how I feel about like people who have a lot of money, you know, all of that. And that is definitely partially shaped by growing up with a father as an accountant. And then also, what else was I going to touch on? Yeah, just kind of like being comfortable in my own skin as I've grown up. And I'm sure we can all think of occasions in our childhood when we were told off, right? Like I have specific memories of being told that I was showing off, being told that I was being too loud, even though I wasn't a loud child at all. Like I was quite shy, quiet and shy and reserved. And also, like, if you think about what was really valued as you were growing up. So for me, my intelligence, my kind of my capacity to think and come up with ideas, and like my academic intelligence was really highly valued. And that's, you know, that kind of thing sticks with you because you're being told like, oh, you're a good girl because of this, and you know, we really value your contribution in the world because of this. And as you say, like other things, maybe you just automatically start thinking, well, this is not valued, or I'm not very good at this, or I'm ashamed of this, or whatever it is. And yeah, it's just so interesting, isn't it, to think about everything that's impacted on you as you've grown up, and everyone else's values, and like how we come into the world with this, you know, everything gets imprinted on us from when we're born. Considering that we're just born as a baby, and literally from the minute that we start developing, and also just from what we know from, you know, developmental psychology as well, that everything starts attaching onto us. And that can be a beautiful thing in lots of different ways, but it can also impact on your mindset and how you see the world.
Definitely. I mean, when you start to realize that you can shift your beliefs about that all the beliefs that you have about the world are shiftable, it's so powerful, because you don't realize, like you just said, you know, you're conditioned to believe certain things, certain truths about how the world operates, about who you are, about how you show up in the world, about how you should be as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, or a partner, or whatever it is. And there's just so many things. And when you kind of shift past that and realize, hold on, I've been believing this thing about money all my life, or I've been believing that I have to stay small, and that, you know, I'm not the kind of person that starts my own business. I'm not the kind of person that's an entrepreneur, or I'm not the kind of person that can be happy or deserves to be happy, whatever it is. And then you question it, and then start kind of writing up your own beliefs, start writing up and shifting to a space of, no, that was like a previous version of me, and those beliefs served me for some time, but now it's time for like something new that feels good, that feels like it's right for the direction that I want to go in. And then you can step into that space, and it's like you're learning safety with this new belief system, because it takes time to shift something, doesn't it? That it's not just gonna, you're not just gonna kind of wake up one morning maybe and think, okay, I'm gonna make like £1 million in this year, and it's just gonna happen unless you've got a really true strong belief about it, right? So it's practicing it and reparenting. So teaching yourself, like, okay, I am safe. I might not have felt safe before, but I am safe to shift these things in my life, or I'm safe to move to this different space of being.
Yeah. And do you want to say a little bit about, I want to bring in this thing about diversity and culture, and how you feel your own cultural background has influenced where you are now. Do you want to say a little bit about that, and kind of what you tend to see in the coaching industry as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Sri Lanka, so my family is Tamil, but I was born in England. So my upbringing was like a merging of two different cultures. And I think for my parents, they came to England in their 20s, early 20s. And so they were kind of shifted from this traditional Sri Lankan village way of being to coming to England and having children, and being very frightened, I think, of being very frightened and protective of us as their children, and being scared of like the direction we would go in. They were really fearful of us getting pregnant, of not getting a good job, all the things that they felt really frightened of, that we wouldn't behave in the appropriate ways that they felt would be suitable, especially as teenagers. So it was a very kind of, you have to behave like this in these sort of constrained ways, and so it was interesting because it was an identity clash. There's beautiful things. I'm very fortunate because I feel like I've experienced two amazing cultures, and I can take from it the bits that I want to take, and I can leave the parts I don't want behind. So that's pretty cool. But it was and continues to be a process of like shifting through certain things. And as for the coaching world, like, it was only actually a recent realization that like the wellness coaching spiritual industry, because it is an industry as well, that it is very white, isn't it? And I think this has been something for me to lean into, because what I've always found myself is that if I was going to get a coach, I most likely wouldn't go to an Asian person. And that's because I've had my own experiences of feeling maybe rejected or feeling like I don't fit in. There's been issues that have come up around trust, and that kind of thing. So I have always gone in that direction, which is really interesting as well, isn't it? So it's something that I have been, working to heal myself. But yeah, it can feel a little bit, when I kind of look at all these different social media profiles and all these coaches doing, an amazing job, but also, there's definitely like a lack of diversity. So then you're purely coming in with a one-dimensional perspective. I mean, everyone's got their own experiences, but a culturally limited perspective of the world.
Yeah.
And so there's so much to offer, isn't there? Having that different cultural perspective added in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think there's also the assumption that I would work with Asian women because I'm Asian. And so there might be Asian women who are attracted to working with me, or Asian men attracted to working with me, which is great, but I'm not an Asian only coach. So that's another thing that comes up. Like, you don't get white coaches kind of thinking, I only work with white people. Whereas I think there is a bit of a presumption that if you're a black coach or an Asian coach, that you stick to your people kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think somebody might have commented on my post, actually, saying something that suggested that. And I was thinking, hold on, like, I'm an all diverse, I will work with anyone. I love working with different people from all over that's what I love about being an online, on having an online business, that I can work with people from everywhere, that it's not just the UK, so that I experience that diversity as well. So yes, that bit is interesting. And another thing that has come up for me around that is that I don't like to talk about race, so I just keep quiet about it, because I just think it's so sensitive. And as an Asian woman, I think this is another limiting belief, or not a limiting belief, a conditioned belief, that you just kind of get on with it. You don't shout about things. And also there's the fear of being shot down, for speaking up. So that's definitely something interesting that has come up for me with that as well.
Yeah. And I feel like, obviously, there is particular world events that occur, and then there's more of a conversation around race or diversity or, racism. And then it kind of, I feel like there's always a little bit of shift, or at least the conversation's happening. It might die down a bit, and then something might happen again. And kind of odd at the minute, aren't we, where like things rear their head in the media, and you can sort of see common themes across whatever's going on. But I think in the wellness world, it is quite a one-dimensional perspective, I suppose, like, as you say. And I guess I'm becoming more and more aware, as my role as a psychologist, and especially working in the inner city, we've both experienced that, where we work with really vulnerable families of all minorities, and then you kind of come out of that, or even if you come out of the city, and my personal experience of working with clients so far and running programs and things is that the vast majority of people who come to me are white. It's something that I'm still kind of like navigating a little bit, I suppose. And it's like, you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to kind of like, put anyone's nose out of joint and upset people about having that conversation. But that's why, it's always kind of ticking over in my mind that, do I want to keep working with organizations where I know that people who wouldn't necessarily approach me for support or be able to afford that So to make sure that my work is like being represented within different in different ways within different organizations. Like, yes, I want to do that. Am I in a position to do that right now? Like, I'm not sure, you know. So it's a really I think everyone's got their own stance on it, haven't they? But I think like it's just that awareness of who are you following, you know, who is filling up your social media feed, like whose voice are you listening to the most,
and how do you respond as well? Like, so what I sort of realized is, hold on a minute, actually what I'm doing here is looking up and almost fawning over a lot of white spiritual coaches, and you know, it kind of just took me back to that place of like, okay, like stand in your power, in your authority, you know, that like you have something to say here that is important, and like to kind of come back to myself and to know my power, and to also be curious, like to be curious about, okay, what's that about? I think curiosity is like a key thing. So I'll give you an example. Actually, that post that I put up, I think I'd said something in the post like, you know, how many white coaches do you know of? Probably shitloads. How many black coaches do you know of? Maybe a few. And then I kind of went to take away, you know, how many South Asian coaches do you know? And it really caused somebody offense, because I had made a comparison to another underrepresented group. And so somebody said to me, you know, you're saying that there's lots of black coaches out there, and there aren't. But to me, that was my reality. You know, it was my experience that I felt that there were significantly more being that I could see. And I hadn't seen any South Asian coaches, but it sparked so much discomfort, because I was like, oh no, you know, this is not what I meant. This is not what I intended. And that's where the curiosity bit is important, right? Rather than just shutting down and thinking, okay, I'm never going to talk about this ever again, which is my initial reaction. It was the curiosity. Okay, I've got this maybe wrong from your perspective, but I'm only basing it from what I've seen. Yeah. You know, and I will, you know, now I feel better informed that actually in the black world that is not viewed as the case at all. So then I've informed myself there, haven't I, with that? Yeah. And I've not judged myself for, like, you know, for the assumptions that I made.
Yeah. And there's something there about just like open-mindedness, isn't there? And I think that's something that applies to not only what we're talking about, but just, I think this links really well back to mindset, actually. Like, we're in this society where sometimes if you hear a view that's different to your own, or if you hear something that's uncomfortable for whatever reason, then either it results in conflict, or there's just like a shutdown, you know, kind of a lack of willingness to engage. And I think, you know, we've seen that a lot over the past 12 months, you know, people's views about whatever's going on, whatever's gonna continue to go on. It's not stopping anytime soon, right? Over the past like 12 months and the next 12 months. And I think it's just, something feels like it's really important to share that, just to have that awareness of like, how do you respond when you hear someone stating something that maybe like you've not considered, or maybe it feels uncomfortable for you, or maybe like it's really strongly against your own beliefs and your own background. How can we come at that from a place of actually feeling that we can take something new on board there, and we can approach that with kindness and curiosity, rather than kind of like shutdown mode. I think that happens a lot.
Yes. I mean, this is why I think that inner work stuff is so important. So whenever I'm triggered, I use it as an opportunity to understand myself better. So actually I see that trigger as like my friend, because the thing that is triggering me is just teaching me something that I haven't like fully kind of worked through. So if somebody says something to me and I feel like the comment on that post, you know, she messaged me, this lady, and my instant reaction was to just say, I'm going to change the post. I'm really sorry. Because I instantly went into the people pleasing like fear of, I don't want people to not like me, because then I'm going to be rejected and not loved, and I don't want to be feeling that way. So then when I kind of realized that I was doing that, I came back to the place of like, okay, like, what is my view here? What action do I need to take? Why is it that I'm getting so triggered by this in this particular way? Because you have literally a physical response in those situations, don't you? Where you feel like you're going into panic, or you feel it's such a learnt physical nervous system response. So A, like realizing that your body is doing that. B, thinking, okay, what is it that I'm getting triggered by? And, you know, I think journaling is so powerful. It's such a powerful technique. Like, just write down, why is it that I got triggered by this thing? What has it made me feel? Like, most likely it's made you feel unsafe. It's made you fear something like rejection or abandonment, or rejection of being loved, or you're not seeing yourself as worthy. This comment that's been made doesn't make you feel worthy. So it just triggers something that is deeper down. So I use that as an opportunity to think, okay, why do I feel that way? You know, and that's where the curiosity comes in. Why is it that I've responded in this way? Why is this situation making me feel unsafe? Have there been times where I've responded like this before? And you will no doubt find a pattern with it.
Yeah.
So then it becomes about you, actually. It's not about the other person. It's not about COVID. It's not about any of those things. It comes back to you. Mm-hmm. So when you understand, and you understand why you're responding in that way, you can then approach things with that compassion, because you can see the hurt part of you. So when you see the hurt part of you, kind of like, okay, like, you just need a bit of taking care of here. You just need a bit of nurturing and looking after. And then, like, once you've done that bit, you can be like, okay, like, what does the adult in me want to do? Rather than reacting from the child place, which is scared and fearful. Mm. Then when you approach things from that space, it's just so much more empowering.
Yeah, definitely. And just reminds me of that quote or that phrase, whatever, which is, other people's opinions have nothing to do with you.
Yes, such a good quote.
Yeah. I love that, because it's so true. And we just get so wrapped up with other people sometimes. And, you know, I work a lot with clients just about disentangling, like, well, that's someone else's stuff and this is your stuff, and what can you kind of own, and what can you work with, and what can you move forward with. But I think, yeah, I could talk about this for a long time, but I think because we are such social creatures, it's complex, isn't it? Because do we need relationships? Of course. Do we need to feel connected? Of course. But there's a point at which we get to where that can sometimes step over, you know, because we end up taking on too much about what other people think, or, you know, absorbed in another person's world, or I think it requires a really high level of awareness to kind of just notice, like, oh, am I veering over too far? Do I need to draw myself back here? Yeah, it's a lot to do that. So just before we start drawing things to an end, I feel like I could be here talking to you for like so we mentioned about the way that you tend to work with clients, the integration work, the sort of recognition of what might have been traumatic. And we've not really had time to kind of delve into your definition of trauma. We've talked a little bit about it. I would love to talk about that more, but I would love if you could just share some kind of starter, maybe 3 tips or 3 strategies for people who might be listening. Maybe this conversation has really resonated with them and they just want like a starting point of things to go away and consider or try. What would your 3 things be?
Yeah, my 3 things. Okay. So the first one is to start seeing your triggers as your friends. I think that's such a massive thing, because you just end up reacting in the same ways again and again and again. And when you go within and look at yourself, that is where the healing happens. And you then, it's a ripple effect, because when you understand that and you work to shift it, because you're aware of it, your relationships with other people shift as well. Mm-hmm. Because you're aware of it, and so you respond in slightly different ways, at least, or you apologize, or whatever it is, that you start to realize, okay, I've got a responsibility here to look at my own things. Then the other thing I would say is to start learning to introduce like a little ritual for yourself. So a little ritual to show yourself that you are worthy, that you deserve this ritual. So pick something that feels good for you. You don't have to meditate if you don't want to. It might be that, like, one of the rituals that I introduced into my life, I do the breath work and journaling and that kind of thing. But one of the things I loved that I introduced was making myself a matcha in the morning. And I make it really frothy and it's in a nice mug. And it feels like, okay, I'm starting the day here with a treat for myself. And I spend money on getting a good quality matcha because, you know, I'm worthy of that. So it's kind of training yourself, like, what can I introduce as a little habit that is showing me that I am, you know, so worthy and deserving of this thing. And when you start doing that, and you then start introducing other things in your life, your sense of self-love, like, just grows and grows more and more every day. The third thing I would say is working on your nervous system. So doing something, again, like, it's not about overloading, it's the small changes, right, that accumulate, that create a shift. So it might be that you set the intention of going for a walk 4 times a week or something. Or it might just even be for 10 minutes, right? But you're teaching, there's something about setting the intention which is important. So maybe you've had this belief about yourself that you can't stick to anything. So by setting an intention where it's a tiny incremental thing that you're doing, you're teaching yourself that, oh yeah, I can actually stick to things. I therefore trust myself. So it might be like, okay, I'm just going to do like a 5-minute, 10-minute walk. And what you're doing also is you're regulating your nervous system, aren't you? Or it might be that you start to introduce a gentle breathwork practice and you commit to that twice a week. And again, it doesn't need to be an hour or half an hour. It could be literally 5 to 10 minutes. Or that you commit to sitting with your nice coffee, and you've bought yourself a really lovely coffee, and that you commit to having 5 to 10 minutes of journaling time where you write down what you want to bring into your life, where you write down what you choose to believe about yourself, about your dreams, you know, not other people's dreams, but your dreams. And yeah, I really think all of those things are about teaching yourself that you're safe, that you can do anything that you want in your life, and that you can also feel safe in the process of it.
Yeah, wonderful advice. Really, I loved that. Well, I loved all of them, but that one about creating a ritual. Yeah, I think it's important for anyone listening to know that, like Rathika said, the practices nothing has to expand beyond 5 minutes if you've got 5 minutes, you know, like the most important thing is starting and retraining like the beliefs that you've got about yourself, that, you know, that you always start something and then stop it, or whatever it might be. We all have those beliefs about our own commitments based on experiences, right? So we can rewire that.
Yes.
Okay, I've absolutely loved this conversation. Thank you so much, Rathika.
You're so welcome.
Make sure that in the description you will be able to check out where you can find Rathika. So I will post her website, I will post her Instagram. Is there anything else, Rathika?
No, those are my two main. Oh, and I have a podcast, the Spiritual Psychologist podcast.
Yeah,
so check that out.
Post that on where people can find you. And yeah, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I've loved talking to you. It's felt very flowy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of your wisdom, and thank you for everyone who might have listened back. Make sure you send us a comment. I'd love to know that you're here. And yeah, thank you everyone. All right, see you later.
Thank you. Bye.